Good afternoon on what is another warm, bright and sunny day. It is Friday the 10th of May and I'm in the reading nook with a nice hot cup of tea and a big box to continue unboxing, because this video will go live on a Monday, so it's time for another Mothership Monday. Mothership is the sci-fi horror role-playing game published by Tuesday Night Games, and we've been playing with what essentially is the Ashcan edition for several years now. Just the player's book, and that's all. And what's surprising, as I keep saying about that, is that constantly you have people being so creative, just using the one book designed to run the game, really create characters. And after that, you know, just go and create content. I mean, essentially just using this one book. Now, I've already done an unboxing of this one book, which is the Mothership sci-fi horror role-playing game Player's Survival Guide. The Ashcan edition is essentially what we've had for the past few years, and with the Kickstarter, we have this lovely box set, which includes at last something which I said right back at the start when I reviewed this. What the game needed was a book for the Warden, a Warden's guide as well. And so what we have now is the Warden's Operation Manual. This is an entirely new book. So we open up and we've got a table of horrors and themes you can throw into the game. You've got this threatening creature there, this giant skull-like thing in the background. And the same warning is in the player's book. And with the main rules in the player's guide, essentially in that, you know, handling how to create characters, how to handle fear, of course, combat, interaction, and so on. We've got the advice for the Warden, so we're concentrating on essentially advice for the Warden, including how to prepare for a game. You know, so get organised, invite your friends to play, read the rulebook, choose a starting scenario, find a horror, and so on, and giving sort of like, you know, an overview of that preparation process, all the way up to step 10. And then we go through that in more detail. So essentially, we've got 10 steps. We've got 10, you know, to do the whole thing. We've got 10 steps within choosing a scenario. You know, because obviously, getting organised, inviting friends to play, reading the rulebook, well, that doesn't need to involve anyone else. You know, but I mean, the more considerations you're going to need are for choosing a scenario. That's one of the first big things. Next thing we have, choose a horror. You know, so find a horror, transgression, omens, manifestation, banishment, and slumber are the different sort of like stages or acts of dealing with that horror. And then something to survive, some effect of that horror. You know, what exactly it is going to, you know, the effects that are going to put your player characters, you know, through the ringer, as it were. So, you know, talking about psychological trauma, social pressures, violent encounters, environmental hazards, resource scarcity are all options given. We have tactical considerations, not only sort of listed, but also illustrated. Rather nice piece there. Essentially, we also have create compelling answers to questions. You know, whenever your players solve a puzzle, they're rewarded with an answer. This should be a piece of evidence that opens up a new line of query or a secret that changes their perspective on the world around them. So, yes, you know, basically when you're creating a scenario, crafting a scenario, create compelling answers, things that are actually worth discovering. And then planning for failure, essentially, you know, coping with what happens with, you know, the players don't perform quite as well as you want, that sort of thing. How to draw a map, even from like the basics of sort of like just putting squares down on a bit of paper and drawing links between them. Tying it all together, so that's including things like something for everyone. So Marines are killing machines, scientists are the smartest in the room, androids go where humans can't. Teamsters build, repair, pilot, and drive. So that's catering to the 4 types of characters, to the 4 kind of classes within the game. And then we have an overview of character creation, this time obviously from the Warden's point of view. And this is essentially the step-by-step process of handling character generation for the first time. So, you know, we have a section here on explaining what a role-playing game is, showing the players how the dice work, teaching them how stress and panic works, and then tell them you will explain the rest as they come up. Because effectively, Mothership's sci-fi horror role-playing game is not a particularly complex game. And for the most part, this will not be of any use to you if you have any role-playing experience under your belt, because you'll know how to do this. But it's still worthwhile advice just to get an idea of how it works, what the author's intent was in writing it, and also, you know, just being a bit prepared in case you have someone who is new to your gaming table and hasn't role-played before. So, here the author steps in and says, here's some safety instructions, you know, this is my advice, this is sort of stepping out of game and being, you know, in mode, as it were. We've got etiquette for the Warden and what she has to do during play, including a section on running games for strangers, which can happen if you are at a convention. Because if you run a game at home, you are going to be running a game mostly for people that you know, so you know their limits. Convention games, you may not necessarily know your limits, know their limits, and that's led to some certain situations, which actually have been reported in the news. Not recently. So then exploring how the game works in play. Describing the situation, and answering the players' questions. So we've got a little diagram of what's a typical game night's worth of play, how does it progress, setting the stakes for the situation, and discussing player decision making and player agency, because ultimately the players sort of like, you know, they've got control over their characters. And I mean, there are always going to be situations where they haven't got control of their characters, but that's part of the narrative. And it does happen. How to resolve the situation, the action, and again we turn to failure, interpreting failure. And of course the rules don't cover everything, so you've got a section there on house rules, making them up. Handling social encounters, because it's not all about encountering the monster. So that covers things like lying and deception, negotiation, playing, using voices or not. And then what happens when, you know, death comes to your player characters. You know, and that includes things, it might happen a lot, tell your players when they might die, make every death count, add their death to the roster, and so on. And then running for investigations, because a lot of the scenarios themselves are investigations into the horror. Excuse me, that's my hay fever for you. Handling ships, because they're expensive to run, and space is dangerous. And then building your campaign, including what you need to prep, what the style is, your campaign frame, how to pitch it, stretching the game beyond the limits of just the single scenario. So here we have some campaign frames, including space truckers, private mercenaries, explorers, dogs of war, corporate inspectors, off-world colonists, crash landers, hyperspace raiders, mining and salvage, bounty hunters. So a good range of options there. And then create a starting area. It's almost like, beginning, start with a dungeon or a country and work out, or a star system, and work out from there. Creating factions for your setting, including a corporate mind map and engaging with corporate power, because for the most part, in the blue-collar science fiction setting, the blue-collar science fiction horror setting, the corporations hold an awful lot of power. And then, how much should a job pay? This is the sort of thing that you're asking, whether, how much should I reward the players and their characters, or specifically the characters, when they do the jobs, and how much does that money income affect their the local economy, including the possibility of them getting rich. And then once it's in play, customizing your campaign, and then your campaign notebook. Keep one of those to store your notes in. That's kind of a classic American school book, composition book. It looks like it's possibly, using already, published modules and so on. And then how to mix the elements up in play. And it says, it's looking also at the horror subgenres, looking for inspiration, and it's got a list of inspiration there. And then sort of general advice on how to tell a good story as part of play, with notes from the designers there. And lastly, a list of sort of like tables and a handful of tables on which to roll for things like factions and planets and settlements and so on. And lastly, a quick overview of the game, not an index, but sort of like a contents page for quick reference. So that is Mothership sci-fi horror role-playing game, Warden's Operation Manual, the book that we've kind of been waiting for since the original edition of Mothership sci-fi horror first appeared. Well, I hope you enjoyed that unboxing in the Nook. If you did, then please do click on the like button down below. And of course, if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to get more unboxings in the Nook, where you will see me out here with a box actually containing another box, from which I will unbox in this case, basically a role-playing supplement game or otherwise. In this case, the Warden Operations Manual for Mothership Sci-Fi Horror role-playing game, and talk about it to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea. Then please do click on the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching another unboxing in the Nook, and we'll be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.